for why people are more and more interested in this idea of virtues. And then I want to go on to the second major theme in my talk, which is how do psychologists actually go about studying virtues? So the nuts and bolts of exactly what do we do when we study virtues. So general approaches to trying to understand or present a taxonomy or framework of virtues, and some general ways of measuring virtues and the associated problems and challenges in doing that. And then the third part of my talk is where I present my own perspective as a Christian and as a psychologist on how do we ground virtues from a theistic perspective or Christian perspective, and where I see problems in trying to ground virtues from a naturalistic one without God. So that's kind of what my talk will be about. And I'm not sure whether, Leonard, you want to step in now to summarize, or you want to do it later? Okay, so I can just step in. And then also I want to talk about the application of virtues too as a Christian, which is practically how do we actually apply virtues as a Christian, and what does it mean as a Christian when we actually being virtuous. So the first trend I want to talk about really is the whole idea of how science has been changing over time. So if you study the philosophy of science, you realize that our scientific understanding or the idea of how we should do science or ought to do science has changed over time. I think the first big issue really is that logical positivism, mainly the whole idea that statements have to be testable and verifiable in order to make any sense at all. So something like virtues or ethics is not really meaningful at all because we can't really test them, can't really verify them, and really ultimately, we think of it as more of preferences. So you prefer to do this, I prefer to do this, but it's really meaningless. And the idea of God as well is meaningless, so you can't actually study God because it really is a meaningless concept to study something like that. So we try to exclude certain things from what science can study and what science should be studying. So that was the, I guess logical positivism had its heyday early in the 1900s, but I think by the 1950s and so on and so forth, we realized that there are very huge limitations with logical positivism in terms of trying to see what science can study or what science can't study. So some of you know probably who Popper is. His idea is that science really is based on falsification. We need to falsify scientific theories in order to, as I guess one main principle of what science is. But his idea is that we actually need values to do science. So it's not that science is empty of any values or any type of virtues in that sense. So it's interesting to think about it that way because, as a scientist, we need to be honest. We need to report our findings honestly. Otherwise, we will mislead the public, and other people will not be able to evaluate our work well. So I think that's one issue. The second issue is that Kuhn, who wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, basically said that science really moves in a way that is very different from how the logical positivists like to view it as. It's kind of very clean, like, okay, we have these theories and then we test them, and then that's how science proceeds. But his idea is that science doesn't proceed that way. In fact, science is very, very messy. And a lot of times we only accept theories not because it's a better theory, not because we can show that the theory is actually better through our data. Rather, it's because new scientists, let's say, adopt a new theory rather than the old one. So it's actually a very sociological affair. It's not actually because one theory is better. So he says that evidence cannot actually adjudicate between two different theories at all. It's just our preferences. Younger scientists adopt a new perspective, and the older scientists die out, and we so adopt this new paradigm. So that's the whole idea behind that. And then Putnam as well said that it's very hard to make a distinction between observable versus unobservable. So the whole idea of logical positivism is it has to be something that I can see and touch and feel in front of me. So that's observable, and that's what empiricism is based on. But in order to do science, we must always do some kind of abstraction. And there lies the problem in terms of, if I'm a scientist, how can I decide what is observable and what is unobservable? Let's say if I look at something through the microscope, is it necessarily observable, or is it becoming more and more unobservable? Or like if you study physics, the whole idea of quarks. Do quarks actually exist? They are a theoretical concept, but do they necessarily exist? Because we can't actually observe them. So I think there's a lot of problems with logical positivism that scientists just realize, oh, okay, that kind of view of science is really, really limiting. And so we have to expand the whole idea of what science is and what science can do and what science can't do. And so I think that's where we become more and more interested in more unobservable things like ethics and virtues and values. So the other trend in psychology, along with the fall of logical positivism, is this, which is Gordon Allport. He's a personality psychologist, one of the founding fathers in studying personality. So if you think about personality, that's where it kind of started. So in psychology as well, it's the same trend. So he had this idea that character is personality evaluated, and personality is character evaluated. So his idea is that psychology shouldn't actually study character, which is personality evaluated. So we don't want to evaluate anybody. Science should really be describing people. So we should actually study personality. Sorry, it's not evaluated, it's character devaluated. Type this. But it's the whole idea that we don't want to evaluate people, whether a person is good or bad, whether a person is ethical or not, or rather we just want to describe people, like this person is outgoing, this person is not outgoing, this person is friendly, this person is sociable, or this person is hardworking, this person is not so hardworking. But we don't want to attach any value statements associated with that, because that's not what psychology is supposed to do, and that's not what science is supposed to do. So that's the whole idea behind that. But things have slowly changed.
你们大家可以清楚听吗？对就可以。所以我就是简单的翻译一下。From the logical perspective. 所以他就是现在他是一个心理学家，心理学是一种社会科学。但是社会科学是要靠什么呢？要靠测量，要靠测量。那他现在要研究的是什么？是德性。不过德性是看不见的东西，是看不见摸不着的。那这个怎么能够测量呢？现在他是先解释一个背景。过去呢有一个东向这个东向呢是关系到这个科学和科学哲学的这个发展。那我们这个20世纪初开始出现了一种运动这个运动都是由这个哲学家、数学家和科学家组成的。这个运动就是被称为这个逻辑实证主义。这个代表比方说罗素他过去访问过中国这个逻辑实证主义的意思呢，就是这一些这个可以被验证的这个命题才是有意义的。你没有证据的、不能够被验证的、不能够被观察的无形的东西，像上帝、伦理、道德这些词都是根本上没有意义，不能够在实验室被研究的这些东西都没有意义那所以这个影响了一定的这个科学。但是以后呢，这个科学实证主义就破产了，有几位这个思想家哲学家他就是反对了这些运动。比方说霍普说这个科学是需要价值科学是需要价值的。而且还有一个叫库恩他就认为这个很多 我们想象这个，尤其是这个逻辑实证主义哲学家所想象的这些这个行科学的、做科学的这一些过程啊，并不是那么单纯啊。我们很多时候很多年轻的科学之所以接受一个新的理论，是因为他们的长辈有这个理论，而没有什么什么验证的过程或者，而且呢，这个科学的通过这个过程是有时候是很混乱的，通过一定的这个信仰方式。还有普特囊是一哈佛大学的一个哲学家，他说有这个可观察和不可观察的这个界限呢是很模糊的，很模糊的。科学研究的很多东西，比方说像夸克你说这个物理学家所研究的这个夸克电子，这个存在不存在，还是一种理论上的一种概念构想，因为它是不能够直接的这个被摸的，也不能够直接的被看得清楚是这样子。然后呢这个刚才逻辑实证主义的这个思想这个东西影响了这个心理学比方说心理学家有名的心理学家阿尔伯他就是认为这个所谓的这个 character 这个中文呢翻译成什么比较好？性格是 personality 这个 character 本来是关系到德性，一个人的好坏，你说好人坏人是这样的。他说这个德性呢，我们不能够研究德性，因为科学呢是描述性，它只是给你做一个报告，不是评论这个人是好还是坏科学只是研究你的性格，你的性格或者你的德性所以他的意思是，所谓这个德性呢，只是性格而已，所以他用比较中性的这个描述的方式。
Thanks, Leonard. I think actually Leonard gives a better talk than me, and maybe he should repeat. Thank you, Leonard. Appreciate it. The other trend for why I think now we are actually interested in virtues and ethics is the growth of what we call positive psychology. So the opposite of positive psychology is negative psychology, but it's not negative psychology per se. It's more of clinical psychology. So I think why positive psychology started was, I think in World War I and World War II there was a lot of interest in psychological problems and illness because a lot of soldiers were returning back from the war in the US. So the federal government was very interested in helping these war veterans, and so a lot of money was being pumped into psychology in order to address some of these issues. And so naturally, science follows where the money is, and so we started to study more and more of psychological disorders, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, so on and so forth. So we study a lot of clinical issues, very negative, so-called negative issues, really in order to help people get well-adjusted. So we always think about it in terms of weakness, human weaknesses, human illnesses, human disease. It's a disease model, just kind of like the medical model. What is the disease, and we try to cure it. But then, you know how science is. If you work on something, on one aspect, in order to make a new kind of advancement, you need to swing to something different. So right now, more and more people realize that, well, it's kind of stale to keep studying human weakness, human illnesses, and mental disorders. We really need to study, what are human strengths? And one of the founding fathers in this area is Martin Seligman. He's at University of Pennsylvania, and his idea is that we need to look at strengths, we need to look at human flourishing, and I think this is a topic that Leonard has been covering, and we need to look at happiness and well-being. So not just thinking about, okay, this is the normal life that we're supposed to live, so bringing somebody with illness back to normalcy, but rather bringing them from normalcy to flourishing. How do we actually move people from one end of the spectrum to the other end? And so we need to concentrate our efforts on studying what exactly are these strengths, what exactly is well-being. And so that's kind of the idea behind that. So virtues is seen as one of the strengths of people. And so right now, psychologists are more and more interested in studying virtues. But really, we've only just really begun in terms of studying virtues. So I think this is the first female astronaut, Liu Yang, and so we want to study people's accomplishments and what are the ingredients that allow somebody to accomplish something like that. and we're interested in happiness and maybe even happiness of pandas. Well, of course, I'm just kidding. It's more happiness of people in general because we are psychologists. But we want to live in a world that is happy, that is meaningful, and I think that's what more and more people are interested in studying. So the other third trend I see really is what I call a crisis in society, in terms of we just realized that it's not simply possible to ignore that people or society or systems can be corrupt and problematic. There's a lot of concerns about ethics and corruption in terms of leadership. Many of you can immediately think of people who you can see would be corrupt in your mind, even in science and politics and business. So here are some examples. So for those who think that science is very objective and free from ethical considerations, there's actually a website called retractionwatch.com, and it actually shows kind of the latest news of what journals have retracted papers and who are these authors. And so actually, even recently, I was just looking this afternoon, there's an MIT professor accused of fraud, evolutionary biologists who retracted papers and suspended. So there are problems in terms of scientists being honest and ethical. One interesting one, which is very ironic, is a professor who actually studies, over here, I'm not sure you're able to see, but he studies ethical leadership, but he has had recently 5 papers retracted from journals because there were severe problems with them, not because of carelessness or anything, but it seemed that it was more of trying to change the numbers in the data so that he can actually have a better picture of what he wants to present. So there's a crisis even in science in terms of, can we actually trust scientists who are producing this research? And here, this is based on my own research. This is from the Gallup World Poll of about 150 countries. And Gallup actually conducts nationally representative sampling of corruption perceptions. So these are based on 2 statements. Do you think that the government is corrupted? And the second question is, do you think business in your country is corrupted? So those are the 2 questions, and then we just, it's based on yes or no for both questions, and we just averaged it and aggregated it to the national level. So you can see over here, 0 means very few people think that the government is corrupted, government and business is corrupted. 1 is lots of people in the nation think that it is corrupted. So this is a histogram of all the nations. So you can see it's very skewed. Lots of countries, lots of residents in countries think that their country, in terms of politics and business, is corrupted. And so here's actually a more detailed corruption score. So Leonard said I'm from Singapore, so actually I'm actually happy that probably only 6% think that the governments and businesses are corrupted. But I can see that the trend will probably increase more and more. So the next country is Qatar, Denmark, Hong Kong, Finland. And you move down, it quickly becomes very high. And I think China is probably 31. And the United States is, I think, somewhere slightly lower than that. And here are some of the most corrupt nations in terms of perceptions. Jamaica, Ukraine, almost 95%. Romania and Lithuania, 97%. So you can see that it corresponds with actual, and these are based on representative samples, really based on people really seeing and thinking that we are actually living in a pretty corrupt world and pretty corrupt country.
所以我只是简单的他就是提供一些背景。第一就是这个为什么要研究德性呢？其他的背景就是这个所谓的这个积极心理学的兴起。那第二次世界大战以后呢，那个很多心理学家他们是专门研究呢 就是人消极的一面啊，就是比方说这个精神分裂症啊、抑郁症啊，这些都是很多这个毛病。然后有一个宾州大学的这个心理学家叫 Martin Seligman，他就是说为什么我们只是研究这个消极的一面，我们也要研究人的这个成功的理由啊，这个人为什么能够成功，人的强处，人的德性，他们就是研究这些所以现在他们要注重于人生的这个积极的一面，能够给人带来幸福的这些因素。其他的这个背景呢，就是现在很多人不管是在西方还是在东方，比较关心这个社会的腐败。很多人很关心为什么这个政府机关、政府这个公务员包括这个科学家，这个都很腐败，有贪腐的行为，有欺骗的行为这样子。所以这一些给大家提供一定的背景。
So I think that one of the takeaway message is, we're not living in a world that is all rosy as often we would like to think of it. So I think that's another reason why scientists are interested in investigating this and trying to perhaps change the way people are doing things. Maybe how can we cultivate honest students, honest scientists, and that is a topic that everybody is very interested in. So now I kind of want to move to the second topic, which is how do psychologists actually study virtues? So, how do you actually even create a taxonomy or a framework for this idea of virtues? What are virtues? So one definition of virtues in psychology is that virtues are universally regarded positive traits that people have. So it's basically similar to personality in a way, but this time we're actually thinking of it in terms of character. So we want to identify characteristics of people that are viewed as positive from most cultures and most religions. So there are two general approaches so far that have been used to examine the idea of what are these characteristics in the first place, and how many dimensions of virtues are there even. So one is called the lexical approach. Lexical approach, you just maybe think of it as a dictionary approach, which is that psychologists will basically look at a dictionary for maybe adjectives or nouns that describe people in a positive manner or a negative manner, and we focus on positive aspects. And we want to see, okay, what are the terms that people generally use, and then we kind of put them all together to figure out, okay, maybe these terms are all similar and they describe a certain type of characteristic. So that's one approach. Another approach that has been used is really what I call a cross-cultural approach. So this is kind of like integrative approach where some psychologists have really examined, okay, let's look at some of the core beliefs of religions across the world and over time, and see what are some of the positive things that different religions emphasize, and then let's use those principles as virtues. So kind of pulling those ideas out, and then examining across countries, across history, and across religions. So really, it's more of an approach that the psychologists try to examine different documents and so on and so forth, and say, okay, based on these things, I think that these are the dimensions of virtues. So I just want to show you how the two different approaches can be integrated. So there was a paper done in 2000 by Colley, and it's a lexical approach. So a lexical approach, again, is based on the dictionary. They pick the different words and then they say, okay, what words are similar to each other. So they came up with 4 factors of virtue. One is order, next one is resourcefulness, next one is serenity, and empathy. So again, these are very broad characteristics. And under, let's say, order, there's so many different words. self-control, obedience, cautious, tidy. Under resourcefulness can be perseverance, even wisdom, intelligence. Serenity can be forgiveness, peaceful. Empathy can be friendly, sympathy, compassion, courtesy. And from the other approach, which I call the cross-cultural integrative approach, they've come up with quite a similar list, but they kind of break it down further. So they break down order into justice and temperance. And then resourcefulness can be broken down into courage and wisdom. Serenity is broken down into transcendence or something like spirituality. And then empathy is similar to humanity. So there is some kind of overlap and correspondence between the two approaches, which kind of makes it seem like, okay, this is a reasonable taxonomy for virtues. And again, this is really work in progress because these are all very recent papers. So we're actually still working to refine these ideas of what actually virtues is. And of course, the whole idea is we basically use words, but underlying that is we use certain statistical techniques as well, which perhaps some of you might be familiar with, like principal components analysis, which is perhaps what computer scientists use and some physicists also use. We use a related approach as well called fact analysis, multidimensional scaling, and cluster analysis. So what we do is we present all these words to people and ask them to rate themselves. So they might think, am I a courageous person? And then they'll rate themselves. And then what we do is, let's say somebody will rate themselves on 100 different terms, and then we have maybe 500 people rate themselves. And then we can use some statistical algorithm to figure out which items or which scales are loading onto which particular dimensions. So, not to bore you, but I'm just trying to show you how psychologists actually go about doing that. So for instance, we might have certain scales that tap on the creativity, ingenuity, and originality. And then we find that these load more strongly on a component called wisdom and knowledge. And then we can verify to see, okay, courage, bravery and valor seems to load moderately, but actually this courage dimension is probably more descriptive, better described by industry, diligence, and perseverance. So this is kind of how we actually go about trying to figure out what dimensions there are in virtues, and we try to make it scientific that way. So that's kind of how psychologists go about studying virtues.
Yeah, 因为这个比较复杂总结一下，他是统计学专家，所以他就有一些，所以他的意思是怎么这个心理学家怎么样研究这个德性呢？德性是什么意思呢？这个德性我觉得德操可能好一点，就是德操、情操，这个道德的情操。所以他认为这个德性被普遍认为是一种积极的这个特征，人的这个积极的特征。他们一般有2种不一样的方式。第一种方式是通过这个官吏的普通的这个，比方说是词典提供的这个意义，比方说这个容器是什么，比方说诚实是什么，就这样子。但是另外这种方式呢，就是跨文化的，就是他们通过研究各种各样的这个历史和宗教文献里面的这一些有关这个道德的这个原则，然后他们抓到了它的核心，然后给这个每个的这个德性提供这个相同的这个定义。所以比方说有的人用有的心理学家是用这个词典的这个方式，或用这个一般的这个意义，他们就是觉得所谓这个德性呢有4种，第一就是秩序，强调这个秩序；第二呢就是有一定的修养，有一定的修养有训练；第二呢就是这个什么呢？这个安定或者这个安宁平安的这个性情；第4呢这个是同情心另外那个跨文化的这个方式呢，他们觉得这个比方说这个是很有名的这个研究，他们说那个德性呢，有的是所谓的这个有几种跟他刚才不一样的，有的是属于正义的，有的是属于节制， 节制、自律，有的是属于这个勇敢、勇气、智慧、超然、transcendent 这个超然这个超脱、还有呢这个人性或者道德This is very hard. OK. So 他就是用这个统计学的这个方式，通过这个一定的这个分析，通过这些这个原则上的这个分析和这个多维度的这个测量，多维度的这个测量，它就是研究来判断给这个德性进行分类，所以他给很多人提供的这个测验，所以我们看他在这里给大家提供的这些主要的这个德性呢，通过这个各种各样的测验和研究的调查，通过统计学的这个安排，他就发现了有的所谓的这个智慧和知识、勇气、人性，人性这个是仁德的意思，好像是同情和仁德，正义、节制。超脱超然就好像宗教信仰这样子但是不一定是有宗教信仰。
So I think this topic is really an ongoing subject of inquiry. We're still studying it right now. So we're actually on the edge of trying to figure out what are some of the main dimensions based on language and based on people's perceptions and history. So that's kind of how we are trying to ground virtues, and that's how psychologists study virtues. One of the problems, of course, with studying virtues in this perspective is, let's say when you ask a person to rate themselves, we expect them to answer honestly, and we expect them to know whether they are a virtuous person or not. So for instance, what would you say, let's say I'm an honest person. Would you say strongly disagree, neither disagree nor agree, agree or strongly agree? Which would you say? And would you change your answers if, let's say, you were going on a job interview? Question mark, right? So these scales are very, very transparent. And it's very problematic for psychologists to use them when we want to study something like virtues, especially when people know, oh, this is definitely something positive. If I say strongly disagree, what does it say? And of course, another interesting problem is, I am a humble person. Strongly agree. Is it ironic if we say, oh, I'm a humble person, or So I think that there are very interesting things when we start to try to study virtues, and when we try to put a number on something like certain dimensions like humility. I think I'm a humble person, but maybe other people don't. So this is the challenge, I think, of measuring virtues, and so the Templeton Foundation was very interested in this issue because they're like, well, we want to study virtues, but we can't actually do it scientifically because of some of these problems. So one possible solution that psychologists often use is really using other ratings. So let's say, now I don't rate myself on virtues, but maybe I get all of you to do ratings on me using the same scales. Am I an honest person? Then we get everybody's ratings, and then we average it together, and then we say, oh, okay, Lewis scored 3 out of 5, whereas let's say Leonard scored 5 out of 5. So perhaps that's more objective. But of course, there are problems with that too, because maybe not all of you know me, and you know Leonard better, so there's difficulties. And also, if we want to collect the data, it's very, very difficult, because now each person needs to ask other people. And if they are dishonest, who knows what type of people they'll be asking as well. So again, there are problems with trying to do this. Another solution, which actually uses a lot of statistical techniques and implemented actually by the military, the army actually in the US, and they have a lot of funding for that, which is trying to figure out, when people are actually interviewing on a job, and you're interested in something like conscientiousness, am I a hardworking person or not? Because we find that conscientiousness does predict job performance. But the thing is, when you ask somebody like that, are you a hard worker? Most of the time, people are capable of faking. They say, oh, 5, I'm very hardworking, so you should employ me. Because it's a very strong situation. So a lot of times people want to show the best side in that sense. So one way of overcoming it, this is implemented in the military, and that's why we're trying to say that we can implement it in the study of virtues as well, which is instead of saying, strongly disagree to strongly agree, a lot of people can just say 4. Now we ask people to rank the following statements in terms of least like me and most like me. But all the 4 options are all positive. So first one can be justice. Second one can be forgiveness. Third one is gratitude, or expressing thanks to people. And the fourth one can be being a positive person. So now which one is the most descriptive of you or not? But through statistics, we can actually get absolute scores or normative scores so that we can compare a person's level of, let's say, justice. Let's say my level of justice with Leonard's level of justice. And maybe my level of forgiveness with Leonard's level of forgiveness. So it's not simply which one is higher within me, but really we can compare across people using statistics. So that's kind of the reason I think Templeton was interested in this, and they funded the project. So just giving you some background in terms of what psychologists do when we say we study virtues, and how do we go about it as a science. So I think that, as I kind of mentioned, the 2 approaches to studying virtues is based on, a lexical approach, which is simply the everyday language of what people use to describe whether somebody is positive or negative. The other approach is really just to compare historical documents and religious beliefs and say, okay, what is most likely universal, and so these are probably virtues or principles that we think should be virtues. But if you really think about all the different religions carefully, there are questions as to whether things are really universal or not. Because the fundamental principles are really very different. So for instance, like Islam focuses on submission, which is submission to Allah, which is obedience to God. So simply, if you submit to God, that is the way to live your life. That is the ultimate virtue. And Buddhism focuses on liberation from suffering. So if you can deny yourself, that is the best way to go about. That's the highest virtue in that sense. And then Christianity focuses on our relationship with God. So again, the highest virtue for each of these religions, just a sample, is really fundamentally very different. So can we actually really compare between the different religions, and whether we can say that something is, these are all universal or not? The other issue, of course, is based on cultural preferences, right? If we use language, language changes over time, people's opinions changes over time too. So for instance, if in the World War, if Hitler had won the war, maybe killing certain types of people would be acceptable, like disabled or things like that. And that would be, again, it's based on cultural preferences, what we prefer. I think that's one of the problems with studying it from a psychological approach. We can describe it well, but the issue is how do we actually ground it in a way that we can say, regardless of culture, regardless of how we use the words, we can say something is good or something is bad. I think that is the key challenge when we actually approach it from a psychological perspective, because that is very, very lacking.
所以这个研究德性是有它的挑战它的问题的。比方说，我们对自己这个判断是有一定的偏见。比方说，如果他们这个你要评价自己，我是谦卑的人，你可以说是非常不同意、同意 还是非常的同意。但是这个是有一定的问题啊，我是很谦卑，我非常同意啊，这个好像是自相矛盾的。所以他就是用其他的方式，就是让你的配偶、让你的丈夫、让你的太太或者你的同事、孩子、朋友给你评价啊。当然这个也是有一定的问题，因为有好朋友，有一般的朋友啊，所以有其他的这个挑战啊。那其他的这个方式呢，他就是用什么方式呢？他就是采用这种方式，所以Templeton基金会对这种工程是有一定的兴趣，所以一起用这种同意不同意的这种方式。我们还有其他的这个多维度的这种选项。那比方说，从这些选项有哪一种是最像你的，或者最不像你的啊？通过这个总结，心理学家可以做一个比较啊。比方说，这个人的这个争议的程度跟那个人的争议程度大概是有但是这个还有最后的问题是什么呢？德性究竟是什么？比方说有普遍的问题，这个普遍性的问题。比方说回教徒说很强调这个对真主的屈服，完全屈服，但是佛教是强调这个脱离啊，基督徒是注重这个和上帝的关系，所以哪一个是最普遍的？这个好像是见仁见智的问题啊。然后还有什么这个文化的因素，比方说这个是不是这个德性的这个正确与否，这个是取决于统治者。比方说这个过去那个这个第二次世界大战的这个纳粹，德国他们的这些所注重的这些德性是不是也是这样啊？所以是有一定的这个文化相对主义的因素。
So here's the third part of my talk, where I want to talk about, as a Christian, as a psychologist, and I view myself as a scientist as well, as how do we actually ground the concept of virtues. So we move more into philosophy here. And here are some problems that I see with a pure naturalistic approach to trying to ground something like virtues. And we can think of it more broadly in terms of ethics and morality. So if everything is a naturalistic, we are living in a purely naturalistic world, that means everything is just matter, time and space, and maybe chance as well. Where do virtues actually come from? That is I think the $1 million question. Some people will say, well, virtues simply just come from it's just evolved. We just somehow evolved to have this sense of right and wrong. So that is one way of trying to ground virtues, and that's the most popular way, in fact, of trying to ground virtues. The problem with this approach is that it's limited in some ways, and here I just want to highlight some, which is, so it resides ultimately in our minds, and it's culturally dictated. So it's just, some people would argue to say it's almost an illusion. You just think of it as right and wrong, but who's to say which is right or wrong? Because you have your preferences, I have my preferences. Really, there isn't any good way to, I guess, adjudicate between two people's preferences or two societies' preferences. Let's say one society is peace-loving, the other society is warmongering. Which society is right? The other second thing is there isn't any enduring quality. So virtues, it's saying that, it's evolved. Maybe virtues can change down the road. Maybe what we think is good now is actually bad. So who's to say something is good or bad in that sense? And ultimately, all of us will die. We will all suffer a heat death with the universe. And so, there really isn't any way to ground virtues from an eternal kind of perspective. And some people might argue to say, well, that's not important. As long as here and now we are virtuous, that's okay. And so that could be one argument against that. The other third argument, which is very interesting, is, in my mind, so it's really a matter of chance that humans have evolved and now we are flourishing, right? But who's to say that if chance had dictated otherwise, maybe the flourishing of viruses would be more important than the flourishing of people. And some people will even go so far to say that wherever people go, we destroy the world. So why should we actually flourish? Maybe other species should flourish rather than people. So there are problems with trying to say, okay, something is virtuous and something is not. When we just simply use a pure naturalistic approach. Oh, and one more thing is, of course, there's even the extent to say, how do we know that something is good or bad? And the whole idea is life necessarily better than death? Because if death is just simply ceasing to exist, maybe the suffering in life is not worth it. And maybe some people should just die because it's not worth living. It's too painful to live. So again, this challenges, I think, positive psychology very strongly. And I think that we need to think very deeply and carefully about some of these issues when we want to study something like positive psychology. And how do we actually ground it? So some people try to ground virtues in a more pragmatic perspective. They say, well, when you do good, you receive good outcomes. So that's another way to say, okay, that is why virtues are good, because you receive good outcomes. When you are practicing good things, you live longer, so that should be a good thing. That's how we associate good things with good things. But of course, it's kind of tautological in terms of, okay, where does good start in the first place? Again, does living longer, is it necessarily good or is it bad? But we have this idea that, intuitive idea that, yeah, living longer will probably be better than living a short life, right? Again, it's cultural again. Rich and powerful people are not constrained by this. We see many rich, powerful people get away with crimes, and they're hardly punished at all because they are rich and they are powerful. And the other thing is, when we often think about good, the highest good really is practicing good in the face of not receiving any good returns, right? So when you actually love somebody unconditionally, even though that person hates you or attacks you, you still love the person. And to us, a lot of times that is the highest level of good. Just like maybe if somebody murders your child, but then you forgive the person. So normally you would say, well, an eye for an eye, we need to kill this person now because they killed somebody. So again, it's very hard to say that virtues necessarily equals to good outcomes. And the third approach really to try to ground virtues is to say that these these principles just exist, and there's no question about it. So my argument is it's not really strictly naturalism, because you're actually saying that there are some kind of abstractions that exist, but it's not constrained by time, space, or matter in that sense. It resides above and beyond what our natural world and interpretation should be. And the other question is oddness in my mind. Why should we conform to these behaviors if they just exist somehow in the air? Not in the air, of course, but somehow exist in the world. Should we necessarily behave in a good way, even though there could be something like good or bad? Should we necessarily behave that way? Again, so there are problems, I think, with a naturalistic kind of approach to trying to ground virtues and trying to help society get better in terms of living a good life. And I think that's something that I think the naturalistic approach has limitations. So I think that in order to kind of ground that, we need to move to another approach, which in my mind, I think a Christian perspective, it provides a stronger foundation for virtues. The first thing is, I think that virtues and ethics or morality reside in the nature and desire of God. That's how I interpret it. So God exists God is transcendent of any material reality, and he basically is the ultimate good, and he is everlasting. So the enduring quality resides externally from us in God, not because of our own imaginations or our own minds. And according to the Bible, from a Christian perspective, human beings are made in the likeness of God. And so that is why we ought to act in the way that God acts, in a good way. And we ought to cherish each other because people are made in the image of God. And that is why human beings are special as compared to all other creatures and animals. And to me, that's why it is important to focus on human flourishing and not necessarily the flourishing of trees or flourishing of monkeys or flourishing of viruses. I think that is why we focus and we intuitively feel that human beings are valuable and important. So we ought to act in a manner like God. We ought to cherish human life. And we are creatures of God. So whether we are powerful or weak, God is the one who dictates how we live. Doesn't matter where you are in the social strata or socioeconomic status. Everybody is under God and should live in a way that is representative of God. And there's ultimate punishment and reward after we die. So that's, I think, one big motivation for why we ought to live in a virtuous way versus a non-virtuous way. So the last part I just want to emphasize is so from a Christian perspective, we understand that, okay, we can maybe ground virtues in a Christian foundation, but how do we actually become virtuous? What are some of the Christian principles of becoming virtuous? So you often hear that Christians say humans are sinners, but I would say that also to go on to say that it doesn't mean that people who are not Christians cannot do good. In fact, the Bible fully endorses the view that we can practice good and we can do good things. But what is different from all the other religions in terms of Christianity, again, different religions emphasize different things. And Christianity emphasizes our relationship with God. So the ultimate virtue for Christianity is really knowing God and enjoying God. And that is the highest virtue of all the other virtues. And in order to do that, the Bible basically stresses that spiritual rebirth is necessary, meaning that we need to have a point of enlightenment in a way. But it's not by human effort. It's not through meditation. It's not through sheer effort. Just like, I practiced so hard, so now I became a Christian. I became much better now than where I was. The whole idea really is so that nobody can boast or be proud in the sight of God. And I think as we think about this concept of humility, which is we think of as a virtue, really, the problem with effort in religion is that it tends to build up a person's pride. We might not say it, but we often think, now I've done so much. Compared to these other people, I'm so good. And actually it builds up pride. And sometimes people can see that, but they don't tell you. They just realize, this person is just a very prideful person. Or I'm doing so many good things, I'm giving so many things to other people, but actually it's out of pride. Because I want to show other people that I'm good. But Christianity is not like that. It says it's not based on effort, it's based on God's effort. So as long as we receive God and Jesus, we can become a Christian. It's just as simple as that, which is really fascinating to me. And to me, why I think relationship is important with God is because virtues is not really a static concept. Because it's not something like, truth, and you need to apply truth in a way that is consistent across all different contexts and to different people and so on and so forth. So for instance, Aristotle already thought about it. He said, virtue really is moderation, but really applying something to the right degree in the right context to the right person. So for instance, if somebody does something wrong to you, it is right for you to get angry. But the tricky thing is, how do you get angry with the person in the right way, to the right degree, to the right, I guess, to the right end, in a sense, so that the person recognizes and changes. That is a very difficult thing. It's all about the relationship. And that is the way, I think, that's how we know. When we know God, then we know how to apply virtues in a way that relates to other people in the right way. So I think that's my perspective on why I think the Christian grounding of virtues conceptually and even in living makes a lot of sense. And it is empowered by God's Spirit. So it doesn't mean that once we become a Christian, we are perfect, but really it is through God's Holy Spirit that empowers us to live a virtuous life. So by daily being with God and praying and reading the Bible would be how a Christian becomes and lives a more virtuous life. So that's all I have. Thank you.
好，这个是最后的部分啊，给大家翻译一下。所以现在最后的部分就是什么呢？就是我们怎么样给德性、给道德提供这个扎实的基础呢？那有几种方式，第一种是通过那个自然主义。那所谓自然主义，这个大概呢，就是好像我们国内的这个唯物主义。那比方说，如果一切都是物质的话，如果一切都是物质，如果只有时间、空间和物质的话，那这个德性是很神秘的。那这个道德是从哪里来的？道德的来源是什么？所以，郑教授的意思就是，自然主义或者唯物主义的这个角度啊是有限的。为什么？因为有一些，比方说有一些这个自然主义者或者唯物主义者，他们认为道德只是在我们的这个头脑里面，只是相对于文化，比方说，所以根本没有绝对的客观的存在。有的但是还有其他的问题，比方说，如果我们要说这个道德是绝对的，是绝对必然的，是永恒存在的，这个世上的一切都是短暂的，一切都是有终结的，没有永恒的东西。包括呢，我们很难判断这个人的繁荣是好呢还是坏呢？比如说很多人说这个人到什么地方都有这个人的这个破坏的能力是这个动物王国是最大的。比方说，那哪一个更重要？是病毒的繁荣还是人的繁荣昌盛？这个是很难判断的。如果没有德性的话，这个是很难判断的。比方说，这个生命真的是比那个死亡更好吗？问题就是，如果一切都是物质的话，我们没有标准，没有客观的标准说什么是好，什么是坏。那还有什么呢？还有一些人，比方说这个可能这个德性是取决于什么呢？取决于它所带来的这个好结果。所以我们为什么要行道德？为什么行德性呢？因为好结果。不过问题是，有一些有权有势的人，他们好像没有受到这个原则的束缚约束，他们还能够这个怎么说？寿终正寝很健康是不是逍遥法外然后还有什么呢？这个很多时候行善是可以说很多时候得不到，有些时候是得不到好下场得不到好下场。而且呢，人这个最高尚的道德德性就在哪里表现出来呢？就是在这个虽然结果是坏的，是消极，对他来说是消极，但是他还是仍然这么做自我牺牲。有些人可能不是唯物主义者，或者不是自然主义者，他认为这个道德德性就是抽象的存在，它就是存在的。但是我们为什么应该要遵从它？如果它只是存在抽象的东西，我们为什么要顺服它？这个是有应该的问题，是应该。为什么我应该要有义务顺从它？这个是基督教的角度。基督教的角度就是德性道德的来源，道德的载体。就是上帝，所以因为道德是永恒的，所以道德不可能只是在我们的思想里面，它是存在于我们以外的。而且基督徒相信这个人是根据神的形象受造的，意思就是人就是像上帝，人是有尊严，人是有尊严，所以人的这个最高的使命或者呼召就是人应该要变成像上帝一样。 它要代表上帝，所以我们也是要尊重人的生命。而且呢，上帝是我们的造物主，我们的主宰，所以上帝的旨意，上帝可以告诉我们什么是要做的，什么是不应该做的。而且，上帝作为这个道德的这个执法者，道德的执法者，他也是会这个有赏有罚这个是来世的这个事情。那基督徒的角度就是什么？人没有相信上帝，还可以行善，还可以做一个道德的人。但是最终极的德性在哪里呢？最终极的道德就是在于认识和爱上帝。那这个是不简单的事情，我们不能够靠自己的能力，我们是要靠这个什么与上帝的这个所建立的关系。所以我们所需要的就是基督徒所谓的这个重生就是改头换面重生彻底的改头换面我们接受上帝。因为道德不是抽象的东西道德不是死板的规律我们这个张教授是提起这个亚里士多德亚里士多德认为道德是关系到中用，持中用中道，所以有一些时候你必须要反映出一个适当的这个表现，适当的方式，适当的这个时间，适当的环境，适当的程度。比方说人侮辱我生气可以吗？可以，但是要有适当的程度，在一个适当的环境，在这个适当的时刻，那这个是需要有敏锐的判断能力。那这样子呢，我们基督徒相信这个通过这个上帝的灵跟我们同在，它可以引导我们可以结出果子来。而且这个是因为这个是圣灵跟我们的这个工作，所以我们也不需要骄傲，我们不觉得这个是因为归功于我是好人，我跟这个当然是不谦卑的是这个意思。所以到此为止，那大家有什么问题呀、建议呀、思想大家可以说可以自由的You can tweet in Mandarin.
Actually English was better. So any thoughts or questions? I know I went over the time, so
that's okay.
Is it over time?
No, not that.
But I'll be happy to answer any questions or thoughts.
有一些想提问题的。张老师，
我感兴趣，因为我是学哲学。我用英文，我用中文吧。
好，中文。我听得到。
我们说怎么衡量？就是你刚才说衡量这个心理道德是吧？
对。
怎么来衡量这个美德？然后就是说，就还是我没听懂，就是怎么来衡量？就是说怎么好？亚里士多德说它是一种适中是吧？用适当，对不对？适当的时间、适当的地点、适当的方式，可能你会表现出来是有美德，是吧？
对。但
是我们在实际生活中，你表现出来是一种什么状态？就是每个人是不一样的，因为它有一个道德，并不是说，虽然它是有一个普遍，我们可以谈的时候有一个普遍的东西它是道德，是吧？但是体现在每个人的身上的时候是不一样的，每个人的感知也是不一样的。怎么来说？这就是美德，这不是美德，这是衡量方式。
Yeah, and I'll answer that in English. I think so. The question is, how do we actually, different people have different reactions and interpretations of what is good versus what is bad. So how do we actually go about measuring what is good and what is bad? So again, that's where the problem in psychology lies. Is how do you actually ground something that is good or bad? Because it's all based on culture, ultimately, and language. So for instance, we might go around and survey, let's say we can survey everybody in the world, and say, okay, is acting kindly to people a good thing or a bad thing? And then maybe 70% of people in the world, let's say abstractly say, oh, it's a good thing. But maybe 30% say, no, it's a bad thing. then is it considered universal? Because a majority of people endorse it, but a minority say no. So I think that's where psychology has problems. We try to overcome this problem by just ignoring it, by just saying, well, most people say it's a good thing, so it's a good thing. That's the only way we can go about it. And I think that's, in fact, how most people in life go about living their life too. So I think psychologists try to sidestep that issue and say, well, a majority of people think that it's good, so it should be good. That's the only way we can say it. But what if, again, like what I said, what if culture changes and says now 30% of people say it's good and 70% says it's bad? Then has it become bad now? Or is it actually objectively good? So I think the problem with psychology is we can't ground anything objectively as good or bad. And I think that science in general can't ground anything as objectively good or bad. And so psychology as a science trying to do that would be very limited. But maybe philosophy, that's where you can try to start presenting certain perspectives to say, okay, how do we provide a foundation for what's objectively good and bad? And I think that's where, as psychologists try to study good and bad, or virtues, or morality, that's where we need to interface a lot with philosophy in terms of trying to do that. So I would say, I would recognize that is a huge limitation for psychology. Because it's all based on opinions.
有没有其他的想提问题或者什么方法？
So based on your title, do you think your thoughts from a Christian psychologist can set a frame to this question and kind of like through all the measurement problems we have in psychology into such a box of being a Christian? So does it mean we can solve this problem to a certain extent?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that my thoughts as a Christian psychologist, in terms of the methodology and in terms of the science of it, it doesn't add anything at all to whether we can study values from a psychology standpoint. It doesn't add anything at all in terms of whether it's in terms of the rigor of how we do it. I think that has nothing to do with that at all. A non-Christian can easily study, or even an atheist, or any person who knows science and scientific methods can apply these methods to try to study virtues in the same way as I would study virtues. But I think where difference starts to occur is, I think in terms of your question of how do we actually know whether something's objectively good or objectively bad. Because again, when we approach it from psychology and even science in general, it's all a matter of opinion. So majority wins, right? So I think that this is right, I think this is wrong. Who is to say who is right or wrong? Maybe we go by majority rule. But we know that majority is sometimes not always right. We know that a lot of times, perhaps the smartest people are the minority, and so they know better than the majority, right? So again, I think there are problems with that when we try to approach it purely from an empirical tradition. But when we start moving into philosophy, that's where I think there are differences in terms of a naturalistic perspective, a theistic perspective, and perhaps other perspectives as well. But I think that in terms of that, the Christian perspective and the theistic perspective specifically allows us to ground virtues in a more objective manner, and helps us see virtues for as what it is. That's kind of my perspective. And also the other thing about, although I kind of downplay the idea that majority rule is not necessarily good, but I think a lot of times it is, people have this intuitive idea of what is good and bad. And as a Christian, I think that that's by God's grace, that God gave us this intuition that we know, yes, murdering a baby is wrong. Most people would say that's wrong, because that's inbuilt in us by God's grace. So in a sense, asking people what is right or wrong, if we get a majority consensus, that can be helpful in trying to say, yeah, in general, we find that this is the case, that most people agree that this is right. But again, these are very black and white cases, but when it starts to move toward political values and so on and so forth, it becomes more gray, because a lot of people have different thoughts about how should we actually go about doing or achieving these highest good. So I think that's where it becomes more difficult and gray.
还有一个跟实际有关的，比如说你找工作的时候，有人会问你这个技术，你到底知道多少程度？有人，我据说听说，比如说好多可能是拿美国人文化，他知道一点，他就说他知道很多，就是有一点点那么优点，他会说的很大，说这样有利于他找工作。比如说像这公司提供这些问题有没有参考意义？他们真能按照这些回答来考虑这个人是不是最好的 candidate， 最好的人员和。
So the question is, during job interviews, very often people might exaggerate a little or say, yeah, I'm really good or I'm very knowledgeable. So how do companies actually go about hiring the best person for the job? So actually, I'm trained as an organizational psychologist, and in fact, I have 2 students who took my class here. And we actually study in terms of how do we recruit and select the best people for the job. We have certain tools. Part of it is personality, so getting people to answer good or bad. Like I'm an honest person or I'm a hardworking person. So in that regard, in fact, there's a controversy in the literature. Some people will say, for instance, if a person doesn't know in the job interview to say, exaggerate a little, maybe that person is not socially skillful, because that context demands that, and they're not able to say, yeah, I actually know a lot more than I do. And maybe that in terms predicts their job performance. So there's one perspective. The other perspective is we can overcome some of those issues, like what I said, by changing the format in terms of how we ask the questions. So we can make it such that it's harder for people to fake. So it's very hard when it's kind of asking, are you a hardworking person? Are you an honest person? Which is more descriptive of you? Then now people can't really fake as easily, in a sense. So some people will say we need to overcome faking itself because, again, that's wrong. But some people will say self-presentation is important. So we need to know how to present ourselves to the best. Like let's say, if I go for a job interview, but I don't present, I don't wear a suit or anything, I just go, in this clothes. Maybe some people say, oh, this person is not putting effort, so it doesn't show, so we shouldn't hire this person. So that's in terms of personality, but also a lot of companies test people on their cognitive ability. So it's actually a test. So it's almost impossible to fake when she's sitting in a room and trying to work on a test. And in some cases, some companies like Google, they will sit you down and they will ask you, how would you solve this problem? And then maybe there are 4 people evaluating you, and you need to solve the problem on the spot in terms of, how do you actually debug the code, or how do you actually create a code that can solve this issue that we are facing. In that case, it's very hard for people to fake because they actually directly test their knowledge. So that's 2 ways of overcoming, I think, the problem that you are talking about in terms of recruiting the best people for the job.
戴老师，您能不能用简短的话概括一下今天郑教授讲的内容，带有结论性的？
好，我先总结一下他刚才给大家提的这个答案尤其是第一个问题，赵老师问的这个问题，还有那个周岩，他就是关系到什么呢？就是他说，心理学家和一般的科学不能够给这个德性提供这个牢固客观的基础，因为什么呢？因为科学家只是按照根据大多数人的看法， 所以比方说，如果大多数人觉得吃人是不好的，那就不好啊。但是这个呢，不一定是这样，是不是？大多数人真理不一定是站在大多数人的一边问题是这样子。但是，所以为什么这一些客观的基础，说绝对的基础，这个我们需要跟哲学家这个商量，这个商议。所以为什么这个工程呢？多多少少也是跟哲学家有一定的这个对话。那另一方面说大多数人这么认为，这个也有一定的好处。为什么呢？因为我们相信，我们有信仰的人，包括这个中国人也相信每个人都有是非之心。那如果有是非之心，我们理当就会相信，比方说你虐待婴孩，这是不对的。比方说这个大部分的人都这样想。那刚才李伯伯说这个可以总结一下，他现在要研究的就是德性、道德、美德每个人的这个德性，每个人的美德。那这个对科学家来说，这个是很艰巨的任务。为什么是很艰巨的任务呢？这个我只是总结以后郑老师会提供这个大家以后吃饭就跟他吃饭，然后他就用中文他这个太客气了不用中文，但是他会用中文他很有力中文很有力所以他第一个是什么？很困难，为什么？因为德性道德是看不见的东西，所以我们怎么能够研究呢？所以他就是给我们提供一些方法所以这个方法呢，主要是靠什么呢？当然主要是靠常识，是跨文化的这个研究。我们从各种各样的文化来抓到一个比较核心、比较普遍的这个道德价值的德性，然后通过这个数据分析进行这个研究。但是还有最后的一部分就是这个道德的绝对性、道德的客观性、普遍性。我们觉得这个是非是很普遍的，是非是很绝对的问题我们不能够，比方说，我们不能够说这个日本侵华这个所做的这些罪行对日本人对我们不好，但是对日本人好也没关系，我们不能够这么说所以道德的评论就是绝对的、普遍的。但是呢，事实上，如果我们相信世界上只有物质只有时间空间没有什么其他的东西，那这个很难解释，因为这个世界上没有什么绝对的东西，没有什么永恒的东西。我们也不能够说这个只是靠文化，因为有一些文化，比方说像纳粹德国，他们觉得屠杀犹太人是好的，是可以的，那我们就不能够接受这个基督教的解释就是根本有那么一种存在是绝对永恒的存在，就有的当然是它是超越自然，它就是上帝。那道德的来源就是在上帝里面意思是这样子上帝所要的就是好的。那上帝是因为它是绝对的存在，是无限的存在，所以这个道德的这个基础也是绝对的，也是永恒的这个是从这个基督教的角度，就是提供了这个更扎实、更好的基础这老师你没有什么问题怎么样？可以吗？
可以
勉强
不过这个道德也是能看见的
道德
比方说你孝敬父母你表现在行为上吗？
是道德是能看见，但是问题是这样子，对道德的评价主要是看那些看不见的东西，就是你的动机那比方说我孝敬父母是为了给我的父母看你的动机是不纯的、不良的，所以动机是看不见，我们只能通过人的这个报告知道他本来是好，但是动机是看不见。不但是动机看不见，是非本身是看不见。是非的标准是普天下说这个杀无辜者，这个滥杀无辜是不好的这个有是非的这个标准，这个是看不见的这个是非到底是在哪里？这个是看不见的。但是如果是非，所谓是非就是上帝本身的意志作用，或者上帝本身的思想作用。那这个虽然我们还是需要再思考，但是这个是解决了一定的问题。但是如果一切都是物质的话，这个是非在哪里？你孝敬父母，有人说对，有人说不对这个就很困难，意思是这样子。所以道德有一些层面是看不见的，有一些是我们可以感觉得到，但是有一些很多方面是看不见所以这个就是为什么到现在科学家不太习惯这个研究这种东西，就是有这个困难
心理学系
好，好，那我们谢谢给这个我们接下来就有这个，因为只有15分钟啊，我们就分组。So we have right now only 15 minutes. Yeah, 15 minutes, but that's okay. Yeah, we can regroup because we have some American friends here. You can